All right, call the meeting to order at 6:01. Ask if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Bureau.
Oh, hello. All right, minutes of November 6, 2019.
Move as written.
Second. Corrections or changes? What'd you say, Nate?
It looks good.
Okay. Hearing none, all in favor of the minutes as drafted? Aye. Public comments. All right.
So I'm the only parent here.
Could just say your name first.
Sorry, Alden Dill on Griffin Road. I'm the only parent here. I'd like to speak to the homework and probation policy. Just so you know, the only parent has been kind of an ongoing theme with this. I watched the video. I was the only parent evidently who spoke with them. I'm sorry that you felt intimidated by my talk in the vestibule. I saw Ms. Liddy when I was here to pick my daughter up. I hadn't got responses on email, so I thought I was bringing my concerns with the policy up. I was happy when I was watching the video that we weren't going to send homework for corrections back. However, Wednesday, we had homework sent back. My daughter got 21.5 out of 22 questions, correct? That was sent back as incomplete. I'd like to point out it's a 97% correct, which would have been an A 10 years ago or 20 years ago when I was in school. Very frustrating. I have questions on this policy. Why do we have this policy? We're the only school in the SSAU with this policy. And the Concord Middle School does not have this policy. So why are we putting extra stress on families and parents? Now, my daughter had a really rough 6th grade, very rough. Mostly because she was frustrated with homework. She had one teacher that kept sending it back for spelling and not substantive science. She gave up on school. I was really excited. 7th grade, we started off strong. She was on the volleyball team, having a great time. That all came crashing down. She was put on probation, told she couldn't attend the last game. Now I'm fighting with a kid in 7th grade to go to school. The mission statement of this school is to inspire each kid to learn. We're not doing that. We're not inspiring each kid. There are kids that are doing very well in the system. I'd argue those are kids that would do very well in any system. I think that we're leaving the lower tier kids on the bench. When you have a fear-based motivation, which is what this policy is, it's do this or you're going to lose out. That's fear-based motivation. You get high compliance, but it's short-term compliance. And then what will happen is we have apathy. We've gone right to apathy. We have no interest in doing homework. We have no interest in attending school dances because none of my friends do that. We have no interest in being on sports teams because they'll just take that away from you. If you go to any social event with middle school parents, you're going to hear this. In the last 2 years I've attended, there's been complaints about this policy. And like I said, I'm sorry I'm the only one here today. Every parent I called told me it's pointless to come in and talk to the administration, which is why we're going to the school. When we got the homework policy last year in 6th grade, we were told that homework leads to quality family time. It does not. Or at least it does not in my family. And it does not in a lot of other families I've talked to. This is causing an incredible amount of stress between kids and parents and parents and parents. Because one of you seems to always be getting after the kids. I really want you guys to look at this policy. My feeling personally, it's time to suspend this policy. My faith in incremental change by this administration is gone. I have no faith in that happening. I'm looking at you guys to make a major change. And again, I know I'm the only one sitting here, but know that I'm not the only one who feels this way. I've had multiple parents reach out to Catherine and I in the last 2 weeks and express the same frustration. Thanks for hearing from me, and I hope we can do something.
Any other public comments? Alrighty. Agenda review.
We have a gift and donation that we need to add to the agenda at some point. If we could do it maybe next.
Put it as C rather than move everything down. Is everybody okay with that? Anything else anybody wants to add or change? All right.
Sorry, maybe a non-meeting at the end for contract discussion,
We can do that.
if there's time. It's
Okay.
not pressing, but if there's time.
All right. So moving on, we have a gift. What do we have coming?
We have an offer of a piano, and Mrs. Withian, Brian, and I have talked about, we always have conversation when there's a piano because we've had a lot of people try to unload a piano to the school, so I always want to know the condition, if we want the piano, what we're going to do with the piano, where we're going to keep it, what the maintenance and upkeep will be. So Mr. Tron is here to talk to you about said piano.
All right, go right ahead.
Hi. So, I have a little thing prepared, if you don't mind. Melissa and I wrote it together, and we were super excited. Students in the DCS music department are encouraged to explore the many facets of music making, including piano performance. The general music middle school students have keyboards to play in a piano lab setting, but no access to an acoustic upright piano. Acoustic pianos have better, more resonant, warmer tone compared to our Casio keyboards. Owning one gives students a more authentic opportunity to create more expressive music with more control over articulations and sensitivity to other expressive elements such as dynamics or volume. 7th and 8th grade general music students will also have an opportunity to see the inner mechanisms of the instruments to understand how it works, which will create a deeper understanding of when learning about the science of sound, which is a co-curricular unit that I'm currently developing with Mrs. Hughes, Kelly, and everything, so that would be cool. A piano would also provide the choral program an opportunity to perform with a musical instrument accompaniment that is genuinely more musical, polished, and professional. This would generate a more quote-unquote buy-in from students and increase motivation for performances with rigor and challenging elements. When it comes to pricing, so it's a donation, so we don't have to purchase the instrument, which is great. And we don't need to pay for shipping or handling of this instrument, which is also great. And we don't need to make any down payments for any piano accessories, which is super great. And the piano will need to be maintained and tuned, if maintained well, just once a year. And I looked at 3 piano tuning services around the area in Hooksett, Concord, and Chester, and it ranges from around $100 to $200 a year, which is great, I think receiving an older donated upright piano in working condition is more financially sound than purchasing an upright piano that have starting prices of around $4,000. Oh my goodness. Ideally, Melissa and I were talking, and we want to have the piano be kept on stage in the gymnasium if that's okay, so it can be readily available to use for concerts and performances, for rehearsals during musical season, the talent show, and other musical events. But we understand that the stage is home to lots of things. So a second home for the piano would be in room 228, which is the chorus room, my room. And that's it.
Zach? So just a couple quick questions.
Absolutely.
You said that the donation includes getting it here for delivery?
Yep.
How do we get it on stage, or does it fit in the elevator to get it upstairs, or have we taken that into consideration yet?
No, but we definitely will take it into consideration. I can have the person measure the piano I would assume that it would be able to fit in the elevator though, because our electric keyboard that I have in my room, it's sort of like an upright piano, same dimensions and everything, or similar dimensions. And so I would assume, but I can definitely follow up on that.
I think that's my only, I guess concern is if we get it here and we find out it's gonna cost $4,000 or $2,000 to get it moved upstairs or.
There's a max weight on that elevator. We talked about it in the recent past about upgrading that. Was it like 400 pounds?
Yeah.
So is there room,
Piano's going to be more than 400 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
is there room to store it on, can it live on the stage? Is there sufficient space? And I'm assuming they're relatively mobile, so it can be rolled from one corner to the other. I don't know.
Yeah, no, there is room in the back of this.
There is room in the back of the stage. It's on casters, I assume. Presumably it's on casters. So realistically, you would.
What kind of piano is it?
So it's an upright piano. I can look at the brand right now. It's not a Yamaha, it's an older one. So I have a picture of it somewhere. Starts with an I. I'm sorry.
Have you heard it played? Are we sure that it's in good, decent shape?
Mm-hmm. Yep. The tech support person that is looking to donate the instrument sent me a video of it playing, and it's in working condition. Yeah, it's an Ivers and Pond, which is was a company in Boston, and yeah.
So the soundboard's not cracked or?
Nope.
Okay.
It's all in working condition, everything.
Do you play piano?
I do play piano.
Okay. How many piano players are there?
And
Does everybody in the music department play piano?
You mean Michael and Alyssa?
Yeah.
oh, yes.
Okay. I want to make sure like everybody.
Like 30 people in music.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to sound.
Make it sound
So
like
we got a big old department here.
So if this is going to live on the back of the stage, and you mentioned having students go down and rehearse and utilize that, how is that going to work with gym activities? And, you know, are we going to be able to segregate that so it's not disruptive either way?
Mm-hmm. I believe that if the piano is on stage, we can just close the curtains on the stage and then separate those two. I've been in schools where the stage of the school is the music classroom, and they usually just close the curtains and everything, and it doesn't really disrupt unless the gym is blasting some music. But other than that, yeah. Yes.
Maybe this is a question for Patty. If we've had multiple offers in the past, why is this one that we're going for? What has changed over the last since the last one?
I think we just automatically go to the school, either administration and or music department, and ask them if they need a piano. That's really all it's about. We want to make sure that it's really a need and not just someone offloading it. And then Michael answered the questions that I always ask. So as long as everyone's in support and wants it, I have no objection.
Any other questions?
Just also to add to that, what do we have 2 pianos, right? Or we only have 1 piano upstairs?
We have 2.
2, and one of them has gotten very difficult to transport.
Piano?
No, 2
Like digital keyboard.
Yeah. And so one of them has become difficult to transport, I think you were saying. So if we just leave this one downstairs.
So realistically, this is going to be for the stage.
The stage personally has. That we've got to have.
Listen, the conversations you have in this building when no one's here, talking things. Yeah, I guess my only thing would be just if we need to have it moved up onto the stage. I don't want it muckled onto by a bunch. I want it done properly. So just if we need to go about it that way, I'd rather we have it done properly and not. I don't want staff getting hurt trying to get it someplace that
Built a ramp on the steps of all, Brian.
No.
Is it being delivered
You don't
by,
want anything that will
No,
No, so
add
you
weight.
is it being delivered by cattle movers?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so, it's being delivered by,
so that would,
Did you find out?
that would be-
The other ones were worth the cost.
I don't know what it costs to get it put on stage, but
Piano movers cost a lot. Just, so, any other questions? All right, everybody who's in favor of saying yes to the piano,
Aye.
all right, you have your piano.
yay, thank you.
All right. We are moving on to the special education budgets. Karen, you are here to chat with us.
Yes, I am. So, I have some handouts here. I don't know how to make the legal size one. Kathy's something you did, so I hope there's enough copies. If not, I could, share with you. So, what I understand to be the crux of the questions that you guys have is why things fluctuate so much between what's budgeted and what ends up being actual, and then we come back and budget again and the actual. So what I did was I went back quite a few years, as you could see, and looked at those changes. I based it, I broke out what we're paying to Concord High and what other students we may have out of district. That number down the bottom that represents the number of students is a combined number because sometimes the cell size is too small and it would identify students. So you guys, when I first came, as part of the SAU when I was our district coordinator and stuff, you guys had some really high cost kids out of district and it was a big thing. And then as you could see, it kind of diminished in those first couple of years there, 13, 14, 15, that number went down. The numbers for Concord High are always based on what we know that we have for kids receiving services and then who is coming in the next year. So when we're sitting down here in November or October to build this budget, we look at the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade kids who will still be at Concord High next year, any incoming freshmen, put that all together into this, I can't show you the sheets because it has names on it, but it lists every service that child has in their IEP and what the cost of that service is. It's all costed out. It's what it's going to cost this year, and then we have to kind of project what it's going to cost next year because there'll be, raises for, paras and their teachers and services and those kinds of things, and an increase in the cost of the special programs. So that's what we do. We take that piece and we look at it all. Mary Dobson, who serves as the LEA at Concord, and Lisa McConnell, give me the information. We look and see what it looks like, and we cost out all those services. So once we cost out all those services, that's how you get your projection for a budget, and the number that comes here, based on what we know today. In fact, the number just changed again for next year because we found out about a new student that wasn't part of the original piece. So it changes. And then what happens between now and next June, you lose some kids. Some kids, move or don't go to Concord High, or some kids who are 12th graders don't graduate, and so they're still there. And then you also have the factor that once they have their IEP meetings in the spring and you have incoming 9th graders and you had projected they're going to need this service, that service, and everything, because it's in that legal document of their IEP, and you project that that's what they're going to still need at Concord High, the team sits down and says, well, maybe we could cut this down a little bit or cut that down a little bit. Well, now they have those meetings in March and April for transition to Concord High, but the budget number's already set. So the number that we project every year is really based on truly what we know at that time. And that's why it always looks so high and may be less. So this year, the latest projection I got was 1021 from Concord High based on all the services of the kids that were there, of what it's going to cost for the rest of the year, okay, for 1920. And we had, and the projection is 814. The budget for this year was 824. So that's pretty darn close considering what we had budgeted and what they're saying. Given the kids that were there on 1021 and the cost of all their services, that's pretty darn close. Anything can happen between now and June to change that number. And we just don't know. The number next year is a lot higher. There's a couple of things that you want to notice. There is that there's a very large freshman class coming in who are identified and requiring services in ninth grade to Concord High, and you have fewer students graduating. And even though the number doesn't look like it's fluctuating that much, it's based on that piece. There was a change in the number of kids out of district. Those kinds of things all play into those numbers and the cost of those services.
So the current freshman class is the large class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because next
So
year
that's
it's a
that-
smaller class.
No, the
This is
2021
identified
class is going to be a larger class. That's why it's 888, 541.
kids Identified.
More.
It's not
It's not the number of kids.
right.
It's
and
not the number of kids, it's what it's
the services.
the
they need.
services. So
So
it's
You could have 20 less kids and $100,000 more.
the
in
kids that are
services.
leaving
Right.
might cost less than the kids that are coming in too. So, but usually by the time kids are seniors, they're receiving less services. So when I look at that, I obviously can't share it with you for confidentiality reasons, but when we do look at that, we see by the time kids are seniors, they're receiving less services. So even, if you are losing the same number of kids, the number might not change because of that. But we look at it time and time again. We get the projections, again, sitting down, any changes that come up between the times that you guys are ready to lock in a number. Lisa and I talk about it, Mary and I talk about it, and, see if we need to make any changes. So it's based on what we know.
Zach?
So, I don't believe this is a good answer to this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. And it's okay to tell me you can't answer it. So when I'm looking at this, and in a span of 6 years, we've seen the out of district go from 41,660 to we're projecting $492,000 next year.
Mhm.
How?
That was that lull. You had a nice little lull there. I remember we all celebrated the fact.
Right, but I mean, that's a huge
Mhm.
swing of the pendulum.
Mhm.
The out of district, could we handle some of those out of district, in district? Is there,
So.
I'm trying to ask a
Okay,
question.
I know what
think
you're
can
trying to
answer.
ask. So here, that process of a student going out of district is after everything that you could possibly use here for resources has been exhausted.
Okay.
So one of the things that we're bound to in special education is educating the child in the least restrictive environment, which would be their homeschool in most cases. So once you start adding this service, adding that service, and you'll see one of the other places where it's offset maybe is when your contracted services line goes down, because maybe we were providing contracted services in the building and that still wasn't enough. What the child needed was much more, and the intensive services that they need. And right now, I truly believe the only students that are out of district are the most intense students that you guys have. Yeah, there's no way that the school could replicate the services that they're receiving.
So I know that a lot of folks at this table deal with this stuff every day, but we are being recorded and the community does watch. Amazingly, I get a lot of comments on, I was laying in bed at 11 o'clock watching the school board meeting.
It's because I couldn't sleep.
It's a good way to go to sleep. Lisa and Karen, could you guys just kind of give a primer on how this budget gets put together? Like, where does this start from? How does it build? And why can't we change it? A lot of it.
Okay, it's all built on their IEPs.
It's all
Yeah,
driven by
service-
services
yeah.
delivered through their IEPs.
And you guys, there's an extensive process to put together an IEP, right?
That's correct. It's a team approach to, made up of special educators, classroom teachers, parents, looking at what services meet the child's need at an individual level. And then those all become things that need to be budgeted for to deliver those services.
And then we sit down and we look at each individual. Again, my backup documentation does have names in it.
Right.
But Lisa and I sit down and we look at each individual, like at the contracted services line, which is the 323 line. We look at all the pieces there. Okay, we had this much PT last year, and this is what it actually was. Which kids are receiving PT? Is that going to continue next year at that same level? And so what do we need to put in? Were there any changes in rates? Were there additional services, those kinds of things? Each of the services is scrutinized to see if that indeed is what it is. So we get the actuals from last year. It's based on that, the information about what students need, and then we have to build in a little bit, if there's, and I'm talking very little bit. I usually just do like 2% because most of the time those services just go up.
And this is just a portion of the special
Mhm.
education budget. This is just the Concord and the out of district, but we have a transportation line for special education, obviously personnel related to special education is another portion of the special ed budget that falls under the overall school budget, but
And when you guys are creating the IEPs and you're having this group meeting about the best solution for children, you're weighing out how to combine services with multiple children.
absolutely. So if it's appropriate to serve a child in a group, then you can have one personnel working with multiple children if that is the best service delivery model for that student. Sometimes if the student benefits from individual, they need that level of support, then obviously that person can't serve as many students, right? So it's really tailored to the student's needs.
But when you put this together, you put it together with an eye towards their savings, and here's where we can actually do something towards savings because it provides services grouped together.
And we talk about whether it's most cost effective to hire within the district, our own personnel, or use contracted services. So those are all things that we take into consideration.
Did you have a question, Nate?
I do. So it sounds like basically the root of it all is the IEP process. And so this process that includes testing and the team approach and discussing and then crafting the IEP to best meet the student's needs, then that informs everything else that comes together as this budget. My question, I guess, is how confident are you in, and I'm sure this always comes up when school boards look at this line, but how confident are you in your, because that is our school or our SAU process, how we go through this crafting process. So how confident are you in the IEP writing process, in identifying what the students' needs are, how to meet it most appropriately, like we were talking about, and I guess so how would you analyze or reflect or look critically at your process? Do you look at things like when students go to Concord and they are they have a new IEP meeting, I assume when they get to Concord or fairly within a year or so of getting to Concord, how often does Concord maintain the same IEP? How often does it change? How often are those services reduced? That might be one way that we would look critically at our process. Or another thing that I'm aware of is that in other towns, and I know this from Northwood, for instance, about 8 years ago, and I'm not 100% that I know this, but fairly good information, I think, that when they went through the Cine-Dinny process, they had an audit. I don't know if it was a state-run audit or who came in to look at it, but their process was analyzed by an outside party, I think a state party, and it was determined that they were over-identifying and that the process that the district was using was open, and so over the course of a year, there was a lot of savings that was discovered just because it turned out that there hadn't been this kind of critical look at how that process was working for the district, and having somebody else come in to look at it. And I'm sure that's part of your professional job, and so that you do this, but I'd just be curious about how that works.
So one of the things we're very fortunate to have here is a very stable population of very seasoned professionals who've been doing this a long time. So they know the gamut of what's available for services for kids and also know how to tailor those services to meet the child's needs. Now, and I am the first one to say, and people get tired of hearing me saying, there's Cadillacs and there's Fords, right? And so you have to figure out where in that line is the place where that's going to fit for that kid. And the seasoned professionals here really do a pretty good job of that. The piece that you're asking about, the evaluation piece, that happens through the Department of Ed. They will come through. We have not had one here in Deerfield. I suspect it will be fairly soon because last year was Chichester and Epsom. This year is Allenstown. We got 2 towns left. So I am expecting that process. And through that process, they look at everything like you described. They will look at our processes and procedures. Now, that being said, some of the things that they looked at in Allenstown and Chichester and Epsom, processes and procedures are the same ones that are used here because they're SAU-wide. So our processes and procedures manual, those kinds of things are all the same. And we share that information too. We have the other coordinators shared with Lisa some things that we found. We've done some trainings based on some things that, maybe were happening in other places that are really important for the folks here to know too, so that you're not kind of left out of the loop. So I suspect that piece will be coming soon as far as having somebody from the outside coming to take a
When
look
was
at
the
it.
last time it happened?
You really want to know? 2005. Yeah, it was that long ago, 2005, 2006. So we have flown under the radar, and so it's actually a good thing if you're flying under the radar, because it means that all the things that would identify you as needing that type of audit have been going pretty well, and your data shows that you are in a good place, as far as compliance with the timeline for evaluations and making sure that you have the participation of parents at meetings and those kinds of things. So they are monitoring those things kind of in the background all the time through our data process, which is the IEPs that are entered into the state system. There's certain data points they pull out of there and check for indicators that we're reported on every year. And if those indicators, kind of go a little haywire, that gives them the flag that you need to go through that process. So there's kind of like a different level behind the scenes happening too.
And there are rules and regulations that we have to follow in terms of identifying children, so it's not just I think he needs or she needs it. There are checklists that we have to use, criteria that children have to meet in order to qualify for special services. And one of the things that we're very fortunate at Deerfield to have is a very strong tier 2 intervention, so that kids are getting support before they may even need to be referred for special education. So, those investments in those personnel too have a positive impact on the special education budget. So it's money well spent across the board for sure. The tricky part is it is always a fluid situation, what children's needs are, and we use a revolving process for when we write IEPs. So we're writing IEPs throughout the calendar year, so it doesn't always fit neatly and tidily into the budget cycle. So someone may qualify for something in January that we didn't anticipate. And so that's what makes it sort of hard, but we do our best. Or if someone moves in that we didn't even know existed.
Sure.
I know, like, from my perspective, I'm gonna spend the next couple of months really getting my head beaten in over our budget, and it's we support everything that the special ed budget is and whatnot, but at the end of the day, what happens is that special ed budget, as it increases, we have to sit here as a board and look at how to keep the overall budget in check. And so I know for me, I'm looking at, this is ballooning 100 or 200 grand over there, and we don't want to go up 5% or 6% or 10%, whatever that may be. So now, where do we find other money in the budget? And then we start taking money away from the rest of the student population. And that's that's, I think the struggle that I always look at when I'm looking at these budgets every year, and that's why, you know, there's nothing we can necessarily do about it, but it's also, it's just, it's most certainly frustrating when you're looking at, you know, how you're allocating the dollars and where we have to take from to try to balance the needs of the taxpayers, the needs of the students, and walk that fine line of what the taxpayers are willing to support, as well as giving the students every opportunity they have and the resources they need to succeed.
Something Patty had mentioned at the last meeting was that we have a special ed trust fund, and we don't typically work off our trust fund, but when there's a drastic increase, that you can plan on using it.
I think that comes in handy for those unknowns that may walk in the door that we didn't
Right.
necessarily.
I think, do you know what the budget is? Is it around 200?
It's not in here. I thought it was not. Oh, okay. I can get that for you next time before you do your warrant articles and
Okay.
finalize, but Amber will be here at the next meeting. You know, people have usually kept that for the, you know, if there's a catastrophic event or a student moves in that we didn't know about, but we also have the luxury of having a pretty good surplus over time. So even if you cut special education, if you said, let's cut it $100,000 and then see what happens next year. So you may not even need to dip into the trust. If we have a budget surplus, then that will cover it. You know, there are options, but
But you're running the risk of
Yep.
somebody walking in the door
Yep.
and having a surprise.
Technically, you're running that risk any day of the year.
Yeah.
In
Exactly.
all fairness, I mean, that can happen tomorrow.
Yeah, you could have enough backup for one kid and two kids come, you know, you just don't know.
Or it could be after your budget's already set.
Right.
Yeah. Which happened in another town after the budget was set and it's May and an extremely high cost kid moved in and you still have to provide everything.
Right.
But it was, at that point, you could not even make an adjustment to the budget, so that would be something that you would want to hit that trust fund for.
In terms of projecting, because you guys see K through 8 here, do you have a sense beyond 2021 where we're going?
What's your seventh grade look like?
For Concord or out of district? Or
Well, I mean, we have the Concord right
I mean,
here,
we always have those bubble classes, right, so where there are, if there's a higher,
right?
you know, a percentage of that class, right, so right now our first grade class is a big class, right, we have the 4 classrooms as opposed to 3.
Right.
You know, that's that bubble group, so, you know, if you were projecting just on percentages, you know, they perhaps have a higher percentage of kids that year would go off to Concord just because it's a bigger group of kids. But it really doesn't always fall neatly based on their grade level either.
So, but for 7th grade right now, and for 6th grade, and then 5th grade, like the next 3 years.
I mean, last year's, the current freshman class was a particularly large group that we sent to Concord.
Right.
The rising 9th graders for next fall is a smaller group. Yeah, I can't see any on the horizon that were as big as the class that we just sent to Concord.
Okay. But they'll be there for 4 years, so there's consistency in that.
Right.
But have you guys, as Nate asked, do you guys follow up with the folks in Concord? And
We do, Mary
okay.
Johnson does, yep,
All
she
right.
attends all those meetings.
do you have a sense of how many kids wind up decreasing in services as they go through high school? I know you'd mentioned it.
So what happens, one of the things, too, is that in the spring when they have their IEP transition meetings, the folks from Deerfield sit with the folks from Concord, and sometimes that's a big place where we decrease the services, because they are moving from 8th grade to 9th grade and just the change and development of the children. And then Mary, every time there's an IEP meeting and some services get reduced or added, because that can happen too, she sends an email to myself and to the folks in Concord so that the budget could be adjusted and their projections on my handy dandy little spreadsheets of, how it's broken out could be adjusted. And so that might go up and down, but she informs us all the time. So if there's like a big change, we would know if a kid left, if a kid moves. The district coordinator, would let us know right away if, a student was moving from our district, moving to another town. That could have a big impact, those kinds of things.
Zach?
I have one more partially related question. So, I mean, right now, we're just looking at basically Concord, a large portion we're looking at, the Concord numbers. Our contract with Concord, obviously, we pay tuition per student, we have the capital fee. We don't necessarily in the contract negotiate special education
Fees, no, you
Fees.
pay what they charge.
cost. But is it conceivable that some districts' special education costs are just plain higher? Like, is that something we should be looking at when we look at potentially future high school scenarios?
Yeah, Concord's salaries are pretty high. So when we're paying for, a student that would attend, what essentially is a learning center, resource room type thing, that's based on, who's staffing it and all those kinds of things. And Concord's salaries for both their paraprofessionals and their professional staff are pretty high. And I think that impacts it greatly. We've already looked at that with them. I remember, I don't want to say 5-6 years ago, we met with them and really scrutinized some of those things because we were very concerned about, like the cost, for example, of a para, those kinds of things, and kind of came to an understanding that what it would go forward looking like as far as, if it was a shared para, how that was broken down and all those kinds of things.
And how often do you audit like that information in Concord to make sure that we're being billed for services that are rendered, and checking for accuracy and all that stuff? I mean, is that?
I get, at the last one I got, last date, there's no date on here. The last projection I got was last month, well, whatever this date is, 10/21. And so I would take that as a base for this year.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're projecting coming in the door. And then we'll get an update and look at that. Usually we get that, we've asked for that, mid-year to look at that. And then if kids are being, like I said, Mary sends us the email, I go through that little sheet and take them off or make a change myself manually and then make sure that it matches.
So, again.
And we've called them on errors that were.
So I guess that's what, I mean, and not to get too deep into the weeds here, but, if a student's supposed to have a one-on-one aid at Concord and the aide calls in sick and they don't have a substitute, that student doesn't receive those services that day, are we still paying for the services?
Because they're still paying for the person. They're still paying the salary for the person.
Just like we would here.
Yeah.
You employ a person to do a job. And if they're sick, they have a sick day.
But I guess my thought process here is we're not employing a person, we're contracting for a service in Concord. So if they're not providing the service, why are we paying for a service? I'm just.
But they're hiring this paraprofessional for us, for our student.
Yeah.
So for us to then say, yeah, but if they call in sick, we're not paying. That would be, I don't think that would be negotiable.
It would have to be in the contract.
Yeah.
I know,
See here what you're saying. But it does sound like the regular standard costs of Concord are higher.
Absolutely, they are.
Say, I mean, you deal with Pembroke. Are they higher than Pembroke again?
Yes.
Okay.
I could say they are.
Okay. All right. Any questions on this?
So I just pulled this one because this is like the biggest place where there's the most fluctuation. Of course, when, we have the trickle down piece, so if you have more kids out of district, you're gonna notice the special ed transportation is going to change, those kinds of things. So, the contracted services, again, is, an area that might go up or down. Because if a student was in district receiving a lot of services and then they go out of district, that comes off that line, we take that off and, it shows up in a different place.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. So, we will now move on to gym floor bids. How exciting.
Not so exciting because they're not due until before the next meeting.
Oh.
Yeah.
I got all excited.
I did too. I think the RFP was December 1st.
I don't know.
I think. It was right before your next meeting. I thought they were going to be in for this meeting, but. not so much.
I did reach out to the town and let them know that we intend on using impact fees for that and to
I think it's great that you named the floor after yourself.
the gym floor. Yes.
That was funny.
It's too early in the night for a joke
That
like
was funny, I don't care what anybody says.
I did ask them just to give them a heads up as they plan on giving money back at some point in December. So
Do we just have to contract to encumber the fund?
we have
before they
to
go back?
we have to go to a purchase order and then request the funds from the town. The selectmen need to approve the funds and transfer them to us, and at that point, it comes off of the trust fund.
Okay, and that'll buy a fairly large window of time.
It will buy us plenty of time.
Okay.
All right, so that's not there.
Oh.
Are we ready?
Yep.
Budget.
Karen, you're welcome to start this portion of the
How
meeting
about if we,
unless
after
you're
we finish
interested.
the 1,200?
Yeah, it's up to you. Before we start, I wanted to hand out information that Nate requested. Just keep the extra. Nate had asked how much the bottom line would be to add and subtract the 2 extra positions. So Amber worked it out for me with, you'll see that we budget for a master's step 5 and a family plan, so sort of a medium, mid-level entry, and the cost for that is $83,464. It says salary with fridge instead of fringe. That just sounds salary with a refrigerator for free. Yeah, free fridge for all.
And keep the name safe. New hiring benefit. Everybody gets a new Kenmore. On sale if you want to see us.
Amber will get a kick out of that. Yeah, we'll fix the typo. There's no fridge included.
No,
So
right there.
it's $83,464 for 1 position or $166,928 for 2 positions. Now, the flexibility that you have, again, this is an estimate. You could decide if you're inclined to approve 1 or both positions. You could say, hey, we're going to roll the dice and we're going to budget for a master's step 2 and lower the amount that you put in the budget. Or if we're going to roll the dice and do 1 family plan and 1 single plan and lower what you put in the budget. But that's just where we have traditionally set the cost for a new addition to your staff.
One with the fridge is that family plan?
Depends on the size of the
Bigger fridge. And I have a summary sheet that I will review with you on the changes in your budget since the last meeting. Mine are numbered. Line 32, Amber did highlight in yellow where the changes are. So on line 32, which is high school tuition, we added 2 Co-Brown students and 1 Bow student was taken out. So we had a little bit of movement, and that was adjusted. Line 137 on page 6. Special ed summer program increased $10,000. And right below it, line 139, the special ed placement line increased $100,000. And again, not something we can talk about down to that fine detail that I'm sure you're itching to have. But like Karen said, it's based on day-to-day. Things happen, things change, kids come in, and we have to make adjustments right up until we go to the MVC for you. Line 348 on page 12. Amber took out the extra bus. So that was a reduction of $59,437. And a couple lines below that, we have 2 more lines that are special education. Both summer transportation increased $5,000, as well as the regular special ed transportation went up $20,000.
Is the health insurance, is that an accurate number now?
That's my next one, yep. So on that page, healthcare, the actual rate, we had budgeted 3%. Our rates came in at 6.2, rather than our estimate of 5, and that's an increase of $42,687. Line 365 was just adjusted $274 because of a plan change. 371 we, this hasn't been voted on yet, but we're anticipating a separation budget, separation benefit, that we'll review later on, and that amount has been put in there so that you would have it as up to date as possible. Those are your only changes. Amber added, Amber will be here in 2 weeks at your next meeting, and I asked her to be prepared to discuss the revenues with you that she prepared, but she did want to get them to you. So in your packet, you have the estimated revenue, where you can get the peak at the adequate education tax that everyone's wondering how much extra we were going to get back. She prepared a tax rate forecast so that you could see where the tax rate would stand as of right now based on the number you have in your budget. She gave you your tax rate history, and she gave you the breakdown on the high school tuition based on where we are today. That's what's in your packet. However you would like to proceed, ready to roll.
Mr. Oxnard.
Do you want me to start a motion, or can I ask the questions first?
You can ask questions.
Okay, so in relation to the numbers I had asked for about the teacher changes to line, I forget which one it is, 30?
It's multiple lines, yeah, benefits.
My question is about kind of understanding how, because these are requested, as I recall, these are requested for the middle school, to break out the current middle school system into teams, which is how it was a number of years ago. And so is that for middle school math and science was the specific request. So my question was like this. So I guess I would like to have a clearer picture about how the middle school grouping currently works. If you take all of the, and can I have
Go right
a
ahead.
couple minutes? If you take all, let's say you've got 50 kids in each class, a 7th and 8th grade class, 50 each, that's 100 kids. And again, this is because I'm not sure what's happening, so I would like more clarity on making this decision. You take these 100 kids and pick a competency, pick a department, pick whatever category you want to pick. They're going to be scattered across a range of developmental situation, position, state. Do you, when you look at a student like that in, let's say, 6th grade and they're going into 7th grade, or the 7th grade going into 8th grade, do you, when you're coming up with your classes, do you group them, like the 7th and 8th grade, my understanding is they can be spread across this whole spectrum, and so you have some 8th graders who are developmentally around like a 7th grade level, just for lack of better terminology, and some 7th graders who are developmentally at an 8th grade level, and then everybody in between. It's like a huge just mix. And so do you tend to take the, let's say the 7th, mostly maybe 7th, some 8th grade students who are, let's say, not as developmentally proficient or competent, and put them into a section? You have 5 sections, you've got 100 kids and they're split into 5 sections, that's 20 kids, I think is my understanding. And then you take like the next sort of 20% and the next 20%, and so you kind of look at them like that? Or do you take these 100 kids and kind of randomly, or I'm sure it's not totally random, but it's a much more heterogeneous grouping to achieve these 5 different groups? And so I'm describing 2 extremes. I'm sure it's not either one of those extremes, but can you say, do you sort of lean towards one approach or another approach in that kind of system?
We would lean. It's complicated because when we begin the scheduling process, we look at math. Math is kind of our first point because there's 7th and 8th grade, there's 3 different categories those 7th and 8th graders can fall into.
Okay.
So from there, then we begin, and world language is a piece too.
Okay.
So those are our kind of, and people would say, well, why world language? But we have one teacher that teaches 2 subjects, and we have to find a balance between how many students will take Spanish and how many students will take French.
Okay.
So, and then you have the combination of who is taking band, who's taking general music. So there's a lot of factors that go into play that the general public might not even consider world language or band to be a factor in scheduling. That is actually a huge process because generally kids who are in a higher math tend to be in the higher French class or Spanish class. They tend to be in band. So all those factors play in. So what that tends to happen is outside the math element in the world language, everything else kind of trickles into a head of these elements. So we don't have a higher ELA class or a lower ELA class. All the kids are mixed from that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. So then my kind of the next question is, as you look at the potential for like a heterogeneously grouped class, you've got a large range of students that are kind of across that spectrum, whatever class it is. And so then a teacher is kind of challenged to try to differentiate or try to meet all the needs of these 7th and 8th grade students in the same classroom, which sounds very difficult. And I can see that leading towards a number, and I'm sure partly behind the request here, that would lead towards the situation where a teacher is kind of thinking about, how do I meet all the needs of these kids? And it may be that a teacher's kind of looking at sort of the middle zone, and there are some 7th graders who are not yet developmentally ready for this, and there's some 8th graders who are sort of beyond competent, let's say. And a teacher is dealing with this range. You might see then as a result that the 7th graders are having a sort of a larger transition to 7th grade than you might see otherwise. And some of the 8th graders aren't, maybe you're kind of itching for 9th grade or whatever it is, but you've got this, that's clearly is a complicated situation. And I wonder a couple things. So here's basically my questions, and as a result to the budget. Does that lead to, I'm coming back to what Lisa was talking about with the tier 2. And so you were talking about how tier 2, and we do a great job of meeting students' needs at the tier 2 level. However, we saw over a couple months ago a new case manager. We see in one of the lines, we see 3 new paras for the special ed line. How much of that is because our tier 1 or our tier 2 in-class differentiation is not able to meet those students' needs? And so therefore they are being identified, they're going through they're being referred to the IEP process, they're being tested, they're going through this process when, and this is a conversation that comes up at every school, but versus looking at tier 1 instruction, tier 2 instruction in the classroom, would that be a more cost-effective way of meeting these students' needs? In effect, could we look at grouping students more about where they developmentally are, and thereby creating more of a tier 1, like in-class help or differentiation support system for these students, so that we don't need to be identifying them and getting paras and going through that process, but meeting their needs in the classroom by a certified teacher who could also meet the needs of other students as well. And I don't know if there's no easy answer to that, but I wonder to what extent you guys have considered that, and if I were to move, I'm not sure I would get the votes, but if I were to remove these 2 teachers, what would it look like next year, I guess?
I think a piece of that, it's difficult to say because you might have a student who is math-minded in algebra, but is very low in ELA, and to make those groupings, we just don't have the population or the amount of teachers to play with the schedule enough to make that combination, those different combinations. The schedule is essentially a giant Sudoku. Once you remove one piece, the whole thing falls apart. So if you have a student, like you said, really good at math, at algebra, if we were to create a tier 2 ELA class, it might only fall at the same time algebra is happening. So now that student has no place to go, and now they're put into an advanced ELA class, and they can't handle that, and they are essentially receive a level 1 or a level 2 on their competency. because they're not at that point. And we don't have another teacher per se, we don't have a third math teacher to say, all right, I can take this student, come over here, where you look at a larger school, maybe like Three Rivers, where you have multiple teamings within one grade level. And so then you could possibly have say, oh, they can't fit this team, let's put them on this team because we can play with that student a little bit more in that sense of their schedule. So I think it comes down to just what we're given here, population-wise, and how many combinations of schedules we can make for one or two students. And going back, like you said, you do have a classroom that you can have a 7th grade peer come in who just turned 12, and you can have an 8th grader who just turned 15. So there can be up to 3 years of physical, mental, and academic play within that one teacher's classroom. And obviously, you use that for behaviors can become an issue or things of that nature. So within that spectrum of just 2 grade levels. So that was a piece of the puzzle. That was one of the factors when we talked about making 3 teams to allow that for a more individualized curriculum for those students, but also more behavior-minded and social-minded setting for those age-appropriate locations. Okay. Sorry, I'm just only talking to me.
Yeah.
Well, he's all by himself.
I know
over
you
there.
guys are always-
That's all. Hiding behind these multiple screens.
So if I could jump in for a sec. So the request is for a math and a science teacher. And I heard you guys talk about the differentiation right now. Math is differentiated. Science is not. ELA is.
Essentially, right now math is and world language. There's 2 levels to world language. Typically, 7th graders take Spanish 1 or French 1. And some, then I wouldn't say all, but a majority of kids go up to Spanish 2 or French 2 while they're here. Some have to stay, and that's another factor too. Some kids aren't ready for Spanish 2 or French 2, and now I have to manipulate their schedule to fit the needs of
Doing it again.
doing it again.
Right.
And then looking down the picture, down the line, like if we forego any kind of teaming when these larger populations come up, we won't be able to have a French class. Rosalind's schedule will not allow for any, it would be either Spanish or French. You won't be able to have 2 subjects, world language subjects. So that's a factor in 2 years for students coming into middle school. It just won't be, right now, French obviously is not as popular as Spanish, so right now I would say it's maybe 3-to-1 ratio. I don't want to quote me on that, but it's pretty close to that. And for us to have an influx of students and try to play with the schedule with close to 20 kids in the classroom, we won't be able to have a French class.
So with the request for the specific for a math teacher, do you envision if it broke out into 3 distinct teams, would it simply be grade-based teams, or do you envision it being more of ability-based teams?
For math, it would. In math, we have had students go up to, as a 7th grader, go up to the 8th grade schedule. And simply what you would do is you would take, so say Mr. Dudley's teaching algebra, that 7th grader would just have to have their schedule aligned, so that their math class, there's a 7th grade math class happening at the same time, the math teacher, and they would pop up into that grade level, and then their 8th grade year, they would do a VLAX course, which we've had in the past, and the student has a VLAX teacher, obviously, but they also have the teacher. They usually work at that time in the classroom, but usually in the back, and they'll, they can raise their hand if that student's in Mr. St. Germain's room or Mr. Billy's room. They can just say, "Hey, I have a question." They could always ask their teacher through VLAX, but they could also ask the teacher that's in the room at the time too for assistance or some input.
Okay, but just visualizing what next year would be,
Mm-hmm.
it would be age-based.
Correct, yes, with the outliers moving up and possibly down too, if they need assistance.
But it would take away from the differentiation based on ability, which we had talked, which was kind of the impetus behind combining 7 and 8 a couple of years ago.
No, that wasn't, no, when we combined 7 and 8 years ago, that was for population purposes. So that was, and the piece of the 7th graders not having any identity. So that you weren't able to have middle school meetings. The idea was that Nate taught 2 sections of science, Ken taught 2 sections of 6th grade, and he taught, 2 sections of 7th grade, he taught 1 section of 7th grade. So you would have a meeting like this, we'd be talking to him because he has that subject, those students. We can't talk to him because he doesn't have those students in this group. So we combined that for population purposes and the idea of everybody could be at the meeting and talk about student needs, et cetera. So.
And you split out the 6th graders being separate, but you
Yes.
left the 7 and 8 grade together.
Right, because of the
It
population.
had been 6, 7, and 8 were together.
No, it had been, no, it was
6th grade was self-contained.
6th grade and then it was 8th grade. There was no,
Oh, but 7 was mixed.
7, was,
Yes.
yeah, 7 shared those 2 teachers, so they were bookends. And then competency, we hadn't initiated competency-based education when we made that model change.
But this would be moving a little bit away from competency.
No, not
More
necessarily at all, no. I mean, we do competency throughout the whole building.
Okay.
And in every grade level. 6th grade is a competency-based education and grading system. And they are self-contained grade level.
Okay.
To what extent do you feel like you can personalize or individualize instruction
If
at the 6th
anything,
grade level?
if anything, I think you would be able to do it more without having the 2 different age groups in the middle because those are your students and you know them for that whole year. You know, it's that idea that the group sizes, the sizes of the students in the room will be reduced. Especially come 2 years from now, you're looking at 28 to 29 students in a middle school classroom. So to really differentiate with 29 kids, is not realistic. So.
How about the social impact? Because I'm having kids go through middle school, the combined 7th and 8th grade is actually a positive thing for a lot of the kids. They like having, it's not the same 40 kids again and again and again for 9 years.
Right.
So
we would continue to do mixed IA classes. So all our specials, with some of the younger kids involved. So your gym, PE, music, art, those are still mixed. We do that with the 5th and 6th graders, and we would continue to do it with 7th and 8th graders. They're in the hall together. There's that. They see each other every time they walk out to the halls. So even the 6th graders, they have more of a block scheduling right now, and they're out in the hall maybe 2 to 3 times compared to 7 and 8 being out in the hall every 50 minutes.
how would we physically fit 2 new teachers?
We are losing the current 5th grade is 4 grade levels, so that leaves a room free in the building. So we would, without getting into the nitty-gritty, possibly move world language to another part of the building and then add that, because right here there's 9 classrooms. So moving world language allows you to place that other classroom into this, the U-shaped middle school that we have.
So it gives you 1 room.
Right, because we have 2, we only need 1 additional room if we went to 3 teams.
Where would that 5th grade teacher go? That you just said is
We don't need it, we need 3 5th grade.
3 teachers next year.
there's 4 now.
Yes,
So where would
and
that
one
4th
is retiring.
So are we really only +1ing then?
So this is just a blended increase because you're asking for 2.
Are we losing?
No, we don't, we're unsure of next year where we're at for our current 1st grade. That large group with the high needs.
How many students is 1st grade?
61.
So this is
Currently kindergarten or?
No, currently 1st grade.
So you're asking for, so a 5th grader 5th grade teacher leaves, And then you want 2 in the middle school? Or 1 in the middle school and 1 at a lower
No,
grade?
2 in the middle school.
Okay.
Fifth grade is being replaced already by somebody on staff. If you're right, I'm not-
Or that position is going down to first grade is the proposal? Or second grade?
We haven't worked out those.
We haven't worked out that, we haven't, it's too early.
I think what we're trying to determine from a budget standpoint, are we overall certified staff? Is the budget request to add 2, or is the budget request to add 1 because we are retiring 1 and adding 2?
And initially when we put this in, we didn't have the retirement knowledge.
So this budget reflects a +2.
But do you need a +1, or you're asking for a +1?
I didn't really
What
plan
about
that out.
students, what about student numbers, maybe this is a way of looking at how we're losing, how many 8th graders this year? We have 60 that are losing?
40.
No, we're,
40.
our current 8th grade is probably our smallest group
Okay.
in the building.
But so even if our incoming kindergartners are 60, which would be really big for kindergarten, that's only an increase net in the building of 20 kids. And I think you're asking for 2 teachers for a net increase of 20 kids in the building.
Yes, but in order to make the 3 teams, we need to have those teachers in place to make the program work.
So the other question is the first grade next year, are you looking for 3 or 4 for first grade? Because at the moment, this budget would afford you 4 teachers for first grade if you were presumably moving that 5th grade position back down to first grade. Do you need 4 for
We're
first grade?
unsure, it's not for this, our current first grade.
I'm sorry,
is
second grade, I apologize.
Yeah.
Do you need 4?
We're
It gives
not
you-
We
sure.
have not made that decision.
We have not made that decision.
15 or 16 to 1 versus 20 to 1.
And it's a very high need.
It's good. To our first, it's actually up to 63.
But this is budgeting for that.
Yeah, this is budgeting for that, say 16 to 1 ratio, 15 to 1. And is 21 to 1 a reasonable number? If they're high needs, it should be, presumably there's gonna be additional support staff inside those rooms.
Didn't we approved paras for that grade, an additional para for this grade?
For kindergarten?
For first grade,
First grade. Yes.
like a non-dedicated
I
para?
don't
No,
No,
not-
I don't think we did.
Because we went to the 4,
That was the original plan.
Oh,
We were
okay.
gonna have
Yes.
3 first grades.
right, we would hire paras for 2 paras. for
If we didn't get the, yeah.
If we didn't get the 4.
So let me see if I understand this. So there's a retirement plan for 5th grade. With that, you're not sure where that position will be in the K-5
Correct.
assignment yet.
Right.
But you think you're going to need it in the K-5 somewhere.
And another piece of that is the unknown number of kindergartners
Coming in.
coming in. So if we have 70 kindergartners come in, we have to have 4 kindergartens. Where right now we have 3 teachers with 60 kindergartners, or 52,
So in 2 weeks, can we have the enrollment sheet updated so that we can look at I'm trying to do this all in my head and that would help
I've got
to
it.
see, oh, you have it?
I got
Alright,
it.
Zach's got it, never mind.
So this is the most up, well, as of last school, end of October.
So,
But, I guess I will be sure.
Yeah, I think we should. So just to sum this up, so right now, there's a request for 2 teachers, the budget for 2 teachers, which would be dedicated to the middle school. There is room, right now there's a reduction in K through 5 of 1, and you intend, that's not budgeted for, that you intend to use within the K through 5, but that is not a definitive decision at this point. That is what I hear. Can we take a pizza break?
yes.
Everybody okay with that? All right, let's take a couple of minutes to eat,
You got the camera?
Oh, yeah.
and we will.
All right, we are back from our dinner break, and the last discussion was around, we were still talking about teachers, the allocation to teachers. You have something to add?
Yeah, so after trying to work this out in my brain, we realized that with the retirement, with the Edith's retirement, If she had not retired, we were actually gonna be letting a teacher go at the end of this year. So that's where that piece of that puzzle comes into play. So we're actually not gating a person, we would have been letting a teacher in the building go.
So your request is +1.
No, still +2.
Well-
But if you were gonna let someone go,
You were,
Because Edith, a fifth grade teacher would have slid down to meet the needs of the elementary portion.
Okay.
So that would have taken care of that piece. But we still need 2 people to fulfill the needs of the middle school.
right.
But if you're going to let one go,
Down
then
1 and up 2 is +1.
Is that right?
Oh.
Yeah, isn't that my point?
You're reorganizing K through 5. So that's net neutral. You're not losing, you're just moving the position, not moving the person.
Right.
Moving
That's not
the
what you just
position.
said.
it is not.
It's not what you just said. Okay.
All right, so
It's
that's what
time
I'm
out.
trying to say, I'm sorry.
Hold on, I want you to ask one more
What Ken
time.
is trying to say, we are,
And then-
yes,
And then for the middle school, you're still +2.
correct.
So the question is whether or not that one position in K through 5 is needed, or if it can go up to middle school.
And that's a piece of the puzzle, so if we see, if for next year
But we need to make the decision on it in the next
based
couple
off
of
that,
weeks.
because next year we might only have 50 kindergartners, where now we have an extra teacher in the building, and then we wouldn't necessarily need to hire the 2 people for the middle school, because we could allocate.
I think for us visual learners, for me, it would help to have that K-5 enrollment by each grade. You know how the grid shows you how many teachers are there currently, what it looks like to move them up. It's just, it helps me to.
So,
I'll get that for you, Patty.
I'm sorry. We have
If I could jump in for a second, it sounds like it is not thoroughly planned out, so at our next budget meeting, we are going to have a more complete picture. So I think beating on it right now is, I think we leave it alone for right now.
Okay.
All right. So, high school was the next big change. So we have a couple of increases at Co-Brown.
And one decrease at Bow.
Right. The tuition is up based on up 192.
It's based on like 10 new students.
Right. Even though our 8th grade going up is smaller than our 12th grade leaving, I believe.
Is it?
Say that again?
Our 8th grade going up is like 42 kids.
Yeah.
And I think our 12th grade was in the mid 40s. So,
So we're just swapping.
yeah, so where does the,
Last,
this is a question for you, probably.
last page is, I think that's what we were just looking at,
Last page?
is the tuition. I was trying to see how Amber broke it out.
So we have,
39.
well, this is next year's numbers already.
Yeah.
This isn't this current year's. So whatever we have in 12 now will be gone.
Yep, 42 will leave, and then how many 8th graders? Well, 46. If that's next year, these are the 8th graders this year. And this should be the 11th.
And we don't see on this what the current number of shelters.
That's right.
So
Presuming
it's
that's
saying
all
that
accurate.
there's basically 36 12th graders based on those numbers. If we're increasing 10.
Is that what? Where'd you get the increase of 10?
Yeah, where'd you get 10?
Well, the budget's gonna, the costs go up.
Costs go up.
I thought there was
It could just be
120,000.
the cost of tuition that went up.
Yeah, I mean, that goes up on us.
I don't think it's that much though. I think she did say, she never said there are more students.
There are more.
So it could be that they moved in this year. If they moved in to high school this year, they would not be in that last year's number because that
Right.
was budgeting based on last year's students.
Okay.
So now they're incorporated into next year's forecast because they moved into the district, into the high school district.
Without, I'm not arguing with it. I'm just trying to figure out the numbers now.
I think that's what,
Okay.
but I think she said more things.
Fortunately, that's a number you can't really touch. So I mean,
Yeah.
you can.
I mean, the kids are either there or they're not.
Right.
Um,
There isn't a lot of discretionary in this budget in the grand scheme of things. the things for us to really discuss are increasing or decreasing staff and how you want to handle that. That has its impacts in multiple lines throughout the budget. We've already trimmed the bus, 56,000, whatever it was. So, I mean, there's,
The other thing we could do is we could say, we could ask to have the bottom line cut by $100,000, and then put it back. I mean, we can make the decisions, or the administration knows better, and if we ask them to cut that, then
yeah,
we can ask them to find a way to do that.
I mean, I think the sense of, my sense, is that we're all looking at that last number and going, ugh, 6.2%, $856,000, that's a lot of money. That's why we're asking the questions about, are we really going up 2 staff members, or do we really need to go up 2 staff members? Can we accomplish what we need to do with 1 staff member? Because that's a larger bite.
Is there somebody in the K through 5 space who's interested in going up to middle school?
Issue with that is licensing credentials for teachers.
But if it's that versus being ripped, then maybe they would be willing to get that license over the next 6 months. Or at least to begin on that process and thereby be okay by the state.
Have you had any teachers who voiced interest in moving to the middle school?
You'd probably end up cutting an elementary position to fill the middle school.
Well, it was just that, like, the 5th grade is already a position that's
It's already going.
is already gone.
Yeah, we're down a position. That's what I'm confused with.
Yeah.
We're down a position in 5th
Right.
grade.
Yeah.
So
Are we adding it someplace else, K-5?
that's
what
what
we
I
need to
want
figure
know.
out. Yes.
Right. That's what I'm trying to figure
Yep.
out.
And that's unknown.
But we'll talk about that Friday morning.
Yeah, because I also want to know how that's reflected in this budget. At the moment, this budget, I believe, is including that
It has-
5th grade
yep,
position is
yep.
carried. So realistically, we
It's
may
never.
have an $85,000 savings in this budget that we're not even realizing yet. That that's 10% of the increase. That's a quick bite at the apple. And then we look at student-teacher ratios in the other grades, and I'm not saying I want to increase them, but do we prioritize what we're trying to accomplish in the middle school and have slightly larger class sizes in the younger grades?
I agree. I can't let $800,000. I mean, I'm only one vote, but this would not pass. And so, I mean, we can send it, it's gonna fail, and so we'll be on a default. Or we come up with a way of cutting, but I'm highly skeptical that this would pass as it is.
Right. We don't have the fall. You do have the
Especially after the storage on. I don't know that bought us a lot of, but anyway, it's a hard conversation to have, but I think that's where we're gonna be in 2 weeks when we come back to this.
And, I mean, from my standpoint with the MBC is I'd really like to button this up in 2 weeks so that we can,
To actually finish it in 2 weeks,
I'd like to, yeah.
I'm gonna move that we cut 1 teacher position right now.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
All right. So we're discussing cutting one of the 2 proposed teachers on line 12.
I'm not saying
Or
from
just
where,
one position,
yeah.
yet to be determined what position that would be. So
And it's not a cut, it's,
No, it's just that budget line. I just wanna cut that budget line by 83, well, the 2 budget lines by 83,464.27.
where are you putting the fridge?
Put the fridge in the storage bubble.
It's already cold. So, yeah, I think I would move that we're only increasing.
Okay, reduce the increase.
Reduce.
My motion is to reduce the increase in line,
12.
12 and, because there's also.
if you could not associate the line, that way we could take, because it's in a bunch of like the FICA line and.
So I move that we decrease the increase by 1 teacher.
So cut 1 teacher from this budget.
Sounds like it.
That was the first thing I said.
That
So-
sounds good.
But we're not cutting staff.
Right, not,
Right.
it's a big.
1 position,
From the proposed budget.
yes.
So here's a question for you. If we reduce this by 1, does that still provide you with the opportunity to create the teams, or is it kind of it takes 2 to create the teams?
We would have to reevaluate what our.
Because then we just have one extra teacher floating around if you can't create the teams.
Right, correct.
I think
And we've discussed.
my thought is we go after increasing that class size for what will be next year's second grade. I think 21 kids in a classroom is a lot. I am married to somebody that would slap me for saying that, but it's doable. She's got 25 right now, she's not very good, so.
So we have a motion and a second to reduce one of the teachers, one of the two new proposed teachers. Any more discussion on reducing one of the two proposed teachers? All in favor of reducing it?
Aye.
Opposed? I don't think we have enough information.
I'm happy to reconsider.
We can put it back, I'm just trying to.
But it passes, so reduce it.
Is there other places that we can look at? Again,
We can consider playing with fire and asking for a reduction in special ed and planning on using our special ed trust fund.
that's kind of like spending your life insurance policy before you're dead,
It is.
and that's my fear.
That is the only other large, I think we have $200,000 in there.
I think you have at least 200 for some reason.
250 is the number that's in my head.
Which would,
I really don't want to plan to spend the life insurance.
there,
beforehand.
I'm not seeing another large impact number in this budget that we could move with.
And this is, I think, earlier where I was talking about my sense of frustration is trying to keep that budget in check and not take things away from all of the students.
So a lot of this is out of our control.
Right,
You know,
I
like
mean,
the health insurance, things like that, that's things we.
the increases are all things we can't do.
We can go back and trim $1,000 here and $1,000 there, but
We can't do it.
It's $14 million.
You're not
Yeah.
gonna come up
it's
with,
gonna add up to maybe
600,000, you're not gonna come up with that.
20,000 if we're, you know.
Yeah, and
that's
so
not gonna-
$20,000 isn't gonna make a liquid difference. If you, and I have no interest in not providing the identified students with everything they need because they deserve every opportunity, but I also feel like the rest of the students do as well, and
So, I'll ask this of the administration. It's not in any way because I think that special ed shouldn't be funded, but to reduce the impact, what are your thoughts on the board working off of the trust rather than reducing the total number and working off of the trust?
I think the trust, the thing that gives me a little bit of comfort with the trust is that we tend to have a surplus every year. So next year, if we have that surplus, we don't have to take it out of the trust.
how much is the surplus gonna be next year?
I don't know. Just saying, if you look historically,
Well,
right?
Right.
You've
And
been
that's what I
okay.
was- That's what I was thinking too.
But I see what you're saying.
You're still
You're,
gambling.
you are.
Historically, we've, for the last at least the last 4 or 5 years, and we've been criticized for having
We had a
sizable
very large surplus this year.
surpluses.
We had a very large surplus this year, but
So I am of the mind of, I agree with Patty that there's been trends where we've had those surpluses that the trust would still be the life insurance policy only if we don't have the surplus.
how much of a conversation can we have about where the surplus was generated from within the confines of that, being able to have that conversation?
Oh, you can. You can have that. You can get all that detail. That's why I think I gave it. Said it in
No.
public that the majority of it was special ed.
No, but how,
What level of detail are you asking?
On
Like
our
why?
Saying what part of special ed?
yeah, like, is it related to one or two students that maybe moved out of town that created said surplus, or is it by finding efficiencies in all the IEPs is where that surplus came from? I mean,
Transportation costs.
The most significant piece was movement, and Concord High was the big contributor. There were, it's hard to give you specifics because it's one kid did this, one kid did that. So for example, students could graduate early, students could move, students could drop out. So there was a lot of movement last year for whatever reason in the special ed population at Concord High.
Okay,
And
we're
I would
looking,
say not just Concord High, I would say Beta, I mean, it happens at all levels.
Yes,
Or can happen at all
yes. I
but
think the largest chunk of money was Concord High School, if I remember correctly. There was several $100,000, I think, just at Concord High,
I think it was,
surplus.
I think it was like something like 300,000.
so that's what I'm trying to put my finger on.
Yeah.
Like, so is, but
But
is that,
there's, that's not a consistent.
but is it Concord finding efficiencies in the IEPs once they
No.
start reviewing them, or is it literally just movement and it
Some,
went away?
yeah, some of that is, but it's mostly
Out of our
movement.
control.
That's right.
And that's the part, like, if we can consistently say Concord finds efficiencies in the IEPs, and we know that we're gonna send them this IEP, and by year 2, they're gonna find efficiencies in it, and it's gonna reduce the cost. Okay, then I'm willing to gamble more.
I mean, just to be clear, it's not necessarily finding efficiencies, it's that if a
It's the
student,
wrong
if a
word.
student has speech and language services in 9th grade and
And
10th
they
grade, you
progress through
hope that they can be more independent and you might reduce that service. Or a student has a one-on-one
Right.
paraprofessional for a year and then you can kind of wean that off.
They progress
So it's, yeah,
beyond.
reducing services for,
Right,
yeah.
I get efficiencies
Based on
is the wrong
needs.
term, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
right, but.
So for the next budget meeting, could we have the trust numbers?
I made that note.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we have maybe as well, if we're gonna talk about playing with special ed lines, can we have what the special ed specific surpluses have been for, say, the last, 5 years? Is that unreasonable?
If you bring that to us, can you also bring the variability that comes with that surplus? Not specific, but like, we've looked at the 5 years and there's no consistency in terms of where all of this is coming from, or there is consistency, or
Actual
Gotcha.
versus budget.
I don't need the detail, just like,
Like, oh, it was transportation 4
Yeah.
years in a row. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep. It's only 2 weeks and we're in the middle of lots of budgets, but I think Karen,
But
if
ours
she
is
can
the
make
only
it,
one that matters.
if she can make it happen, she will. I will put someone on that for you.
okay.
Oh, here.
So, is there anything else that anyone would like to?
No, the insurance increase was a nasty surprise, but
That's you can't touch it.
Yep.
Yeah, I do like seeing that the transfer to food services drastically went down.
Beautifully.
That's fantastic.
Did the retirement rate change, or is it just,
Contribution changes.
on the 17.8%?
I don't think it changed I don't think the percentage changed, it's just the equation, yeah.
We could reduce the attorney line, but
That's not wise.
no.
I would highly advise against
not
that.
all of it's not in our
You're-
control.
I ran that by the attorney, they advised against it.
Can I ask what would be an ideal percent increase in your opinions?
So,
Like, I mean, like what do we, if we were to look at down here as administrators, what do we do to help?
I think the closer you can have it to cost of the COLA increase, which is usually around high 2s, 2 to 3, the easier it is to sell it to the community. That being said, the community supported a new contract for teachers, and there are built-in costs there, and the community supports the education. It's just the
that would be
But
another,
this is sticker shock.
right,
it's like
So,
another helpful
I think
thing
there's
for
ways
us
that we
is-
can. I'm really interested. I'm willing to play with.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm saying we're gonna work at chipping that down, but like Nate said, if we were to take this to the voters next week, there's no way.
Okay.
can I just point you though to the difference between the 21 proposed budget and your default budget? The difference between those two numbers is less than $300,000.
Yep.
and that's because of all the special education.
And that is basically what we're working with, is that
Yeah.
$300,000.
That's right. So
Where are you-
that's,
where are you- I'm sorry, where are you-
you could tell us to cut 5, but we'd be cutting 200
I'm not
more than our,
asking you to.
no, I know, I just wanna make sure people saw that the
No.
difference in the default is not.
So, I guess another question that maybe, we don't have handy, but we had estimates for what the teacher's contract was going to actually cost once ratified each year.
That's in the budget.
No,
The pair is not.
no, the fair is not, but what I'm getting at is, so whatever that first year cost was of that budget is part of that $856,000 increase. That was a cost that was approved by the voters. So
Yeah.
we need to, you know, and I don't recall what that number was out of the contract.
And you would need to include that in last year's budget number rather than, because it was a warrant article.
It was a warrant article, it became part of the budget, but what I'm saying is, if that was $150,000, if the
It's
warrant article
160,
said
I think,
it was
is
a
the-
160, it was 150, 160. So of that 856, 150 that was requested by the voters, or 160, whatever the number is. So, okay, that was at, you know, that was at their approval, okay? It's still, I mean, it's still a big number, but, you know, pulling a teacher out saves some money, you have the increase of the contracts, which was approved by the town, so I mean, that to me is, it's gonna go up by that amount, regardless. And then a lot of the rest of it, I think, is tied to special ed, which is unfortunately really the only tough decision for us to make this year is, do you wanna put it up?
Yeah, it's all salaries, benefits, and special ed.
So let's ask a different question. Did the administration leave anything outside of the staff increases out of the budget? Is there something that you said, ooh, a kiln or something like that that you didn't put in the budget that could have been, should have been, may have been? Was there a request that you guys asked? Or was this budget all inclusive of everything?
I would say we took everybody's wishes and hopes and dreams and desires, including ours, which, and because that's what you guys wanna see,
Yep.
what do you need, and so
Yep.
that's in here.
No, that's fine. So I think based on the discussion tonight, more clarity around how those now the one teacher role works, whether it works, how that is envisioned, and then I think the other big question is if we want to consider using the trust as part of the budget.
Or at least as a guarantee.
Right. Are there any other specific lines that anybody wants to deal with tonight? Nope. Okay. Patty.
I would just like to point one thing out. I think, and Zach said he wanted it done for the next meeting, and I don't know that you have a ton of choice because if we're on schedule, because the next meeting is the 4th, Wednesday the 4th. Amber's not in district on Friday the 6th, so whatever you decide on the 4th has to be, all the numbers have to be changed by her and the binders to the MBC by that Saturday. So that's gonna be really tight.
Yeah,
It's almost impossible unless you guys change that meeting, and
on the 4th.
I don't know how, it's only 2 weeks away, so I don't even know how much sooner
Next
you could.
Wednesday is Thanksgiving
Thanksgiving,
Eve, and I can
right.
assure you I will not be at a meeting on Thanksgiving Eve.
So it's really tight.
You do one in the second.
Are you meeting with the NBC on Tuesday?
Yes, we're at weekly.
So I don't know, maybe it's gonna be fine, it just depends on what you guys do with the budget. Because every change in the budget has a trickle effect into all the backup documents.
It doesn't sound like there are too many lines being considered.
It's, yeah, when,
Pretty tight the way it is, we just need some final details.
yeah, just definitely plan on trying to get it done
Okay.
in 2 weeks.
All right.
I just wanted to check something real quick if I can.
And if anyone thinks of anything in the meantime and you wanna email me that you're wondering about something and a cost of something, you can do that ahead of time and then I'll bring it with me. Or am I doing that?
Yeah, so the Saturday the 7th was the proposed day to receive our budget. They wanted to start working on Tuesday the 10th. So if we were to finalize it in 2 weeks, could we have the binders for the 10th? Because that Saturday meeting may or may not occur. They don't always have to have a work session. We kicked through some stuff pretty quickly last night.
I mean, yeah, but get those few extra days would be great.
Okay. So I mean, I can.
But let's see how it goes in 2 weeks. If you guys don't make a ton of changes, we can probably have them whipped up and ready to roll.
But the 10th would be the drop dead.
Well, the 10th, they want to start the school's budget. I mean,
Yeah.
the intent is to have the town's budget done before the 10th, so that they can, the NBC can start cracking away on the school's budget. And that gives them 3 Tuesdays and a Saturday if necessary, 2 Tuesdays and a Saturday, I'm sorry, to deal with the school's budget.
Can I talk about the NBC schedule
Go
for
right
a
ahead.
moment? Do you mind?
Sure.
Kathy was putting the calendar together. I think there's a conflict. Is there a public hearing or a meeting that was changed to a Thursday at some point in that schedule? I think.
Public hearing is on Thursday, January 9th.
So I think there is a meeting. It would mean Amber and I dividing, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would have to.
When do they expect us to present?
The budget.
Yeah.
They'd like to receive it at the Saturday work session, and then start working on it on Tuesday, the 10th.
Which is when we should all arrive and be able to speak to it.
I'd like to, if we can, I'd like to really, I mean, the other option is to offer a draft to the MBC with the understanding that it's a draft beforehand, so the members can start reviewing it if you want to. I inform them, I mean, the drafts are now currently on the
Yeah,
website
sure.
anyway, so
You can look
I
anytime.
direct them to the website
Yeah.
if they want to see it, but.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense because, as you know, once we give them the budget,
It's their budget.
It's their budget,
And I
so we
reminded
don't-
them of that
we don't
last
want-
time.
we don't wanna give it to them
We
until-
stopped
yeah.
providing them with a draft. And the current chairman indicated that the purpose of providing the draft is that it's a draft, and I said, well, unfortunately.
But yeah, everything is online, so.
Yeah.
Legal, what time is that on that Tuesday as well?
NBC meetings start at 7 o'clock, sir,
Thank
and they are thrilling local entertainment.
Always fun. All right, any other questions on the budget? Are you guys clear on what we want to see? All right. Do we need to have non-public or anything else? We didn't add a non-public.
Just a non-meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So, motion to adjourn.
So, move.
Second?
All in favor? All right, we are adjourned at 8:02.